"Marrying you was the biggest mistake of my life," my husband declared to his groomsmen at his brother's wedding, his voice carrying across the reception tent as I approached with champagne flutes. What David didn't know was that the vineyard where we stood, the wedding he was celebrating, and the trust fund that had supported his lifestyle for 8 years all came from the fortune I had built and hidden while he believed I was simply his devoted housewife. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years before that devastating moment at the wedding, I had been Dr. Catherine Morrison, the youngest woman ever to earn a doctorate in international finance from Stanford University. My dissertation on emerging market arbitrage had been published in 3 prestigious journals and translated into 7 languages. At 26, I was managing a portfolio worth $200 million for Goldman Sachs, specializing in high-risk, high-reward investments that consistently outperformed market expectations by substantial margins. My reputation in the financial industry was built on an uncanny ability to identify undervalued assets in volatile markets and transform them into extraordinary returns. Colleagues called me the market whisperer for my talent in predicting currency fluctuations and commodity price movements weeks before they occurred. My client list included Fortune 500 CEOs, European royalty, and technology entrepreneurs who trusted my analysis over their own internal research teams. The work was intellectually stimulating and financially rewarding, but it was also consuming every aspect of my personal life. 18-hour days were standard, weekend work was expected, and vacation time was theoretical rather than practical. My corner office on the 47th floor of the Goldman Sachs Tower had become more familiar than my apartment, and my relationships outside the financial industry had gradually disappeared as my professional commitments intensified. When I met David Harrison at a charity fundraiser for veterans organizations, he represented everything that was missing from my high-pressure existence. He was charming, attentive, and genuinely interested in conversation topics that extended beyond market analysis and investment strategies. As a marketing director for a nonprofit organization, he worked with communities rather than spreadsheets, and his passion for helping others provided a refreshing contrast to the competitive environment that dominated my professional world. David seemed fascinated by my intelligence and professional success, asking thoughtful questions about my work and expressing genuine admiration for my achievements. Our early conversations lasted for hours as he encouraged me to share insights about global economics and investment theory. He would listen intently as I explained complex financial concepts, often saying that my analytical mind amazed him and that he had never met anyone with such sophisticated understanding of international markets. Our courtship progressed rapidly, with David pursuing me with romantic gestures that demonstrated creativity and thoughtfulness. He would surprise me with picnics in Central Park during my brief lunch breaks, arrange private dinners at restaurants, where we could continue our intellectual discussions without interruption, and send handwritten notes to my office expressing appreciation for my dedication to both professional excellence and our developing relationship. 6 months after our first meeting, David proposed during a weekend trip to the Hamptons, presenting a vintage engagement ring that had belonged to his grandmother. His proposal speech emphasized how much he valued my intelligence, ambition, and commitment to making a positive impact through my professional work. He assured me that he wanted to support my career goals and build a partnership where both of our professional aspirations could flourish. The wedding planning process revealed the first subtle signs of what would later become a systematic pattern of diminishment, though I was too deeply in love and too focused on managing my professional responsibilities to recognize the warning signals. David gradually took control of most wedding decisions, explaining that his background in marketing and event coordination made him better suited for managing the complex logistics involved in organizing a large celebration. Initially, I was grateful for his assistance, as my work schedule made it difficult to dedicate adequate time to vendor selection, menu planning, and guest coordination. However, I began to notice that my preferences were often overruled in favor of choices that David considered more appropriate or practical. When I expressed interest in a particular venue, he would present detailed arguments about why alternative locations would be superior. When I suggested specific menu options, he would explain why different selections would create better experiences for our guests. These discussions were always presented as collaborative decision-making, but the pattern consistently resulted in implementations of David's preferences rather than compromise solutions that incorporated both of our desires. More concerning was his tendency to make unilateral decisions about significant elements of the wedding and present them to me as accomplished facts rather than proposals for discussion. The most revealing incident occurred when I discovered that David had canceled the photographer I had selected and hired a different professional without consulting me. When I questioned this change, he explained that his choice was more experienced and would deliver superior results. His reasoning was logical, and his intentions appeared supportive, but the unilateral nature of the decision suggested a fundamental lack of respect for my preferences and judgment. Our marriage began with a beautiful ceremony at the Ashworth estate in Connecticut, surrounded by colleagues from both of our professional networks and family members who celebrated our commitment to building a life together. The reception was elegant and memorable, though I noticed that most conversations focused on David's work with veterans organizations rather than my role in international finance. When introduced to new people, David would typically describe me as his brilliant wife who worked in finance, but the emphasis was clearly on the relationship rather than my professional accomplishments. The first year of marriage proceeded smoothly as we established routines that accommodated both of our career demands. David was genuinely supportive of my work schedule and never complained about the long hours or frequent travel required by my position at Goldman Sachs. He would prepare dinner when I worked late, handle household responsibilities when I traveled internationally, and express pride in my professional achievements when discussing our careers with friends and family members. However, I gradually began to notice subtle changes in how David discussed my work in social situations. Initially, he would describe my role with specific details about my responsibilities and accomplishments. Over time, his descriptions became more general, referring to my position simply as working in finance, rather than highlighting my expertise in international markets or my track record of exceptional investment performance. When I mentioned this trend, David dismissed my concerns as oversensitivity to casual conversation dynamics. He assured me that he remained proud of my career and was simply trying to avoid overwhelming social gatherings with complex professional discussions that might exclude other guests. His explanation seemed reasonable, and I chose to focus on the substantial support he provided for my demanding work schedule, rather than analyzing the implications of his changing communication patterns. The transformation became more pronounced during our second year of marriage, particularly after David received a promotion to senior marketing director at his nonprofit organization. His new role involved managing larger campaigns and coordinating with major donors, responsibilities that required networking skills and strategic thinking, similar to what I used in my investment work. Suddenly, David began offering suggestions about my professional decisions and investment strategies. Despite having no background in financial markets or economic analysis, when I would discuss challenging client situations or market uncertainties, he would propose solutions based on his marketing experience, suggesting that his skills in persuasion and relationship management were applicable to investment advisory services. Initially, I found his interest in my work endearing and appreciated his desire to contribute to discussions about my professional challenges. However, his suggestions were often impractical or demonstrated fundamental misunderstanding of financial industry regulations and market dynamics. When I would explain why his ideas would not be effective, he would become defensive and suggest that I was being dismissive of his input. These conversations became increasingly uncomfortable as David seemed to expect that his suggestions would be implemented rather than simply considered. When I continued following my own analytical frameworks and investment strategies, he would express disappointment that I was not taking advantage of his insights and experience. The situation reached a turning point when David suggested that I was being too conservative in my approach to high-risk investments and should adopt more aggressive strategies based on his observations of successful marketing campaigns. His recommendation would have violated several federal regulations and could have resulted in severe penalties for both myself and Goldman Sachs. But he dismissed my explanations about regulatory compliance as excessive caution that was limiting my potential for exceptional returns. That conversation revealed a fundamental disconnect between David's perception of my work and the reality of operating in a heavily regulated industry, where compliance and risk management were essential for both legal and ethical reasons. More troubling was his assumption that his insights were superior to my decade of specialized education and professional experience in international finance. The dynamic continued to deteriorate as David became increasingly critical of my work, schedule, and travel requirements, despite having initially expressed understanding and support for these professional demands. He began suggesting that I was prioritizing career advancement over our marriage, and that my commitment to excellence was creating unnecessary stress in our relationship. When I received an offer to join a prestigious investment firm in London, with significantly enhanced compensation and expanded responsibilities, David's reaction was distinctly negative. Rather than celebrating this recognition of my professional capabilities, he expressed concern about the disruption such a move would create in his own career trajectory and social connections. His opposition to the London opportunity was presented as concern for our marriage and mutual professional development. But the underlying message was clear. My career advancement was acceptable only as long as it did not interfere with his priorities or require any sacrifices on his part. I declined the London position, choosing to prioritize our marriage over what would have been an extraordinary professional opportunity. David expressed gratitude for my decision and promised that he would reciprocate such consideration if similar situations arose in his own career development. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. However, when David was offered a position with a larger nonprofit organization 6 months later, he accepted immediately without consulting me, despite the fact that his new role would require extensive travel and would significantly increase his work schedule. When I pointed out the inconsistency between his expectations for my career decisions and his approach to his own opportunities, he explained that his situation was different because his work involved helping veterans rather than pursuing financial gain. This double standard marked the beginning of a pattern where David's professional ambitions were characterized as service to important causes, while my career was increasingly portrayed as materialistic pursuit of financial success rather than meaningful contribution to society. The characterization was particularly frustrating because my work involved managing investments for charitable foundations, university endowments, and pension funds that supported millions of retirees and students. My analytical expertise was directly contributing to the financial security of teachers, firefighters, and other public service professionals. But David consistently dismissed these contributions as less meaningful than his marketing work for nonprofit organizations. Over time, these subtle diminishments accumulated into a systematic redefinition of my identity within our marriage. The brilliant analyst who had earned international recognition for innovative investment strategies was gradually replaced by the supportive wife whose primary function was facilitating David's career advancement and social networking activities. The transformation was so gradual that I initially failed to recognize its scope and implications. Each individual incident seemed minor and could be explained by reasonable motivations, but the cumulative effect was a complete erosion of my professional identity within our relationship. By our third anniversary, David was routinely introducing me as his wife rather than by my professional accomplishments, and conversations at social gatherings focused entirely on his work, while my career was mentioned only in passing, if at all. When I would attempt to contribute to discussions about business strategy or economic trends, David would redirect conversations toward topics where he could demonstrate expertise while positioning me as an interested observer rather than an experienced professional. The pattern had become so entrenched that challenging it would have required confronting the fundamental dynamics of our marriage, and David's apparent need to be perceived as the dominant professional voice in our relationship. Rather than engaging in that conflict, I chose to focus my energy on excelling in my work while accepting the diminished role that David had created for me in our social and family interactions. This decision would prove to be far more strategic than I realized at the time, as it laid the foundation for the extraordinary transformation that would eventually expose the true balance of power in our relationship and demonstrate the remarkable capabilities that David had systematically concealed from his family, friends, and professional network. The foundation was being constructed for a revelation that would transform not only our marriage, but also the understanding of everyone who had witnessed my systematic diminishment while unknowingly benefiting from the financial empire I had been building in careful secrecy. The transformation of my role within our marriage created an unexpected opportunity that would prove far more valuable than any promotion or professional recognition I had previously received. As David systematically reduced my public identity from respected financial expert to supportive wife, I gained access to information and insights that would have been impossible to obtain while maintaining my high-profile position at Goldman Sachs. David's nonprofit organization, Veterans Alliance Foundation, operated in a world that intersected with government contracts, political influence, and substantial financial resources in ways that most people never understood. As his wife attending social functions and charity events, I was present for countless conversations about funding mechanisms, political relationships, and strategic decisions that revealed the intricate networks of power and money that drove major philanthropic initiatives. Initially, my presence at these gatherings was purely supportive, focused on helping David build relationships and advance his career within the nonprofit sector. However, my analytical mind could not ignore the patterns and inefficiencies that became apparent through careful observation of how these organizations operated. The Veterans Alliance Foundation was struggling with fundamental strategic problems that were limiting their effectiveness and wasting millions of dollars in donor contributions. Their approach to program development was reactive rather than proactive, responding to immediate crises rather than implementing systematic solutions that would address root causes of veterans' challenges. More significantly, their financial management was unsophisticated and often counterproductive. Large donations were being placed in low-yield savings accounts rather than investment portfolios that could generate substantial additional funding for programs. Grant applications were being submitted without comprehensive cost-benefit analysis, resulting in funding requests that were either too small to achieve meaningful impact or too large to be approved by cautious foundations. The board of directors consisted primarily of well-meaning individuals with limited understanding of modern financial management or strategic planning. Most had achieved success in their respective fields decades earlier and were applying outdated approaches to contemporary challenges that required innovative thinking and sophisticated analysis. During one particularly revealing board meeting that I attended as David's guest, I listened to 3 hours of debate about whether to pursue a $50,000 grant for job training programs. The board members discussed the potential impact of this relatively modest funding while completely ignoring opportunities to leverage their existing assets into much larger revenue streams that could support comprehensive programming. My analysis of their financial statements, which were publicly available through regulatory filings, revealed that the foundation was sitting on $12 million in cash reserves that were earning less than 1% annual returns. Chauffeury. Properly diversified investment portfolio could have generated at least $600,000 in additional annual income, enough to fund 12 job training programs, rather than debating the merits of a single modest grant. The inefficiency was staggering, But it also represented an extraordinary opportunity for someone with the expertise to develop and implement sophisticated financial strategies that could multiply their impact while establishing new models for philanthropic effectiveness. I began conducting detailed research into the Foundation's operations during my free time, analyzing their programs, financial management, and strategic decision-making processes with the same rigor I had applied to international investment opportunities. The exercise was intellectually stimulating and provided a productive outlet for analytical skills that were no longer being fully utilized in my reduced professional role. My research revealed that similar inefficiencies existed throughout the nonprofit sector, where organizations with billions of dollars in combined assets were generating minimal returns on their investments, while struggling to fund programs that could transform lives and communities. The problem was not lack of resources, but rather lack of sophisticated financial management that could optimize existing assets while attracting additional funding through demonstrated effectiveness. This discovery sparked an idea that would eventually transform both my career and our marriage in ways that David could never have anticipated. Rather than simply observing these inefficiencies, I could use my expertise to develop solutions that would dramatically enhance the Foundation's capabilities while building my own influence within the philanthropic sector. However, any direct approach would face resistance from existing leadership and could create conflicts with David's position if my involvement was perceived as undermining established relationships. The solution required a more sophisticated strategy that would allow me to demonstrate value while maintaining the supportive wife role that David had created for me. I would need to develop influence through indirect channels that showcased my capabilities without directly challenging existing power structures. My opportunity came when I overheard a conversation between David and the Foundation's executive director about their struggle to attract a major donor who was interested in supporting veterans programs, but wanted evidence of exceptional financial management and measurable impact. The potential donor, Elizabeth Hartwell, was a retired technology executive who had built a fortune through strategic investments and was known for demanding sophisticated analysis before making substantial philanthropic commitments. David was frustrated because the Foundation lacked the analytical capabilities necessary to prepare the type of comprehensive presentation that would satisfy Hartwell's requirements. Their previous attempts to engage major donors had failed because they could not demonstrate the strategic thinking and financial sophistication that serious philanthropists expected from organizations seeking substantial support. This was precisely the type of challenge where my expertise could create extraordinary value, but approaching it directly would have raised questions about my involvement and could have undermined David's authority within the organization. Instead, I developed a more subtle strategy that would position me to contribute without appearing to overstep the boundaries of my supportive role. I offered to help David prepare for his meeting with Hartwell by conducting background research and developing preliminary analysis that he could use as the foundation for his presentation. My suggestion was framed as assistance with his professional responsibilities rather than independent involvement in the Foundation's strategic planning. David accepted my offer enthusiastically, grateful for any support that might help him succeed in this high-stakes opportunity. He provided me with access to the Foundation's financial records and program data, trusting that my background in finance would enable me to develop useful insights for his presentation. Over the following 2 weeks, I conducted comprehensive analysis that went far beyond what David had requested. I developed detailed financial projections, program effectiveness metrics, and strategic recommendations that demonstrated exactly how the Foundation could transform its operations to achieve extraordinary impact while providing exceptional returns on philanthropic investments. My analysis identified specific opportunities to increase the Foundation's annual program funding by 300% within 18 months through optimized asset management, strategic partnerships, and innovative funding mechanisms that I had observed in international markets but had never been applied to nonprofit operations. More importantly, I developed implementation frameworks that would ensure sustainable growth while maintaining accountability to donors and measurable outcomes for veterans served by enhanced programming. The comprehensive plan addressed every concern that sophisticated philanthropists typically raised about nonprofit effectiveness and financial management. When I presented my research to David, his reaction was immediate amazement at the depth and sophistication of my analysis. He had expected basic background information that might help him answer questions during his meeting with Hartwell. Instead, I had developed a complete strategic transformation plan that could revolutionize the Foundation's operations and impact. David's presentation to Elizabeth Hartwell was extraordinarily successful, largely because he was able to present detailed analysis and strategic vision that exceeded her expectations for sophistication and innovation. She committed to providing $2 million in initial funding, with the possibility of additional support if the Foundation could demonstrate successful implementation of the proposed strategies. The success created an unexpected complication. For David, as Hartwell insisted on meeting the analytical team that had developed such impressive strategic planning, she wanted to discuss implementation details and ongoing monitoring frameworks with the people who would be responsible for executing the transformation plan. David was forced to acknowledge that his wife had developed most of the analysis, though he minimized my contribution by describing it as research assistance rather than strategic planning. Hartwell immediately requested a meeting with me to discuss the technical aspects of the investment strategies and program effectiveness metrics that had impressed her. This meeting would mark the beginning of a relationship that would transform my understanding of my own capabilities and potential impact outside the traditional financial services industry. Hartwell was not only impressed by my analytical work, but also intrigued by my background in international finance and my apparent interest in applying sophisticated investment strategies to philanthropic objectives. During our 3-hour conversation, Hartwell shared her frustration with the nonprofit sector's general lack of financial sophistication and her interest in supporting organizations that could demonstrate the same strategic thinking and performance measurement that characterized successful business operations. She had been searching for opportunities to support innovative approaches to philanthropy that could serve as models for broader sector transformation. My work with the Veterans Alliance Foundation represented exactly the type of innovation she wanted to encourage, and she was interested in exploring ways to support my continued involvement in developing and implementing these strategies. However, she was also sensitive to the potential complications created by my marriage to David and the possibility that my contributions might be constrained by organizational politics or relationship dynamics. Her solution was elegant and strategic. Rather than working directly with the Veterans Alliance Foundation, she proposed establishing an independent consulting firm that could provide analytical and strategic services to multiple nonprofit organizations while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. She offered to provide initial funding and ongoing support for this venture if I was interested in pursuing entrepreneurial opportunities within the philanthropic sector. The proposal was simultaneously exciting and terrifying, as it represented an opportunity to build something entirely new while potentially creating complications within my marriage if David perceived my independent success as competitive with his career advancement or threatening to his professional identity. However, the opportunity was too significant to decline, particularly as I had become increasingly frustrated with the limited scope for utilizing my expertise within David's organization and the constraints created by my diminished role within our marriage. I accepted Hartwell's proposal and began developing plans for Morrison Strategic Consulting, a firm that would specialize in financial optimization and strategic planning for philanthropic organizations. The name honored my maiden name while avoiding any obvious connection to David's organization that might create conflicts of interest or internal complications. The consulting firm would allow me to work with multiple organizations simultaneously, developing expertise across different types of philanthropic initiatives while building a reputation for innovation and effectiveness that could attract additional clients and opportunities for impact. More importantly, it would provide financial independence that would reduce my dependence on David's income, while creating opportunities to demonstrate my capabilities to audiences who would evaluate my work. Based on results, rather than relationship dynamics or preconceived assumptions about my role as a supportive wife. The decision to establish Morrison Strategic Consulting marked a turning point in my journey from diminished spouse to independent professional, though the full implications of this transformation would not become apparent until much later, when the hidden financial empire I was building would be revealed in ways that would shock everyone who had witnessed my systematic diminishment. The foundation I was laying during these early months of observation and strategic planning would eventually support not only my own professional resurrection, but also the financial security of David's family in ways that he could never have imagined while he was busily reducing my public identity to serve his own ego and career advancement. The observer in plain sight was becoming a force for transformation that would prove far more powerful than anyone suspected, including myself. The analytical skills that had made me successful in international finance were finding new applications in philanthropic strategy, and the relationships I was building through my consulting work were creating opportunities for influence and impact that extended far beyond traditional business networks. As I established my consulting practice while maintaining my supportive wife role, I was learning valuable lessons about the power of strategic patience and the importance of building capabilities before revealing intentions. The foundation I was constructing would soon support transformations that would surprise everyone who had underestimated my potential for independent success and meaningful contribution to causes beyond David's imagination. The awakening of hidden power was just beginning, and the next phase would reveal opportunities for impact that would dwarf anything I had achieved during my previous career in traditional financial services. The first 6 months of operating. Morrison Strategic Consulting taught me lessons about entrepreneurship and client development that no amount of academic training or corporate experience could have provided. Working from a small office space in Lower Manhattan that I rented under my maiden name, I was building a business that existed in complete secrecy from David and his professional network, funded entirely through my personal savings, and Elizabeth Hartwell's initial investment. The challenge of maintaining dual identities required extraordinary discipline and strategic planning that extended far beyond simple time management. During daylight hours, I was the supportive wife who attended charity luncheons and foundation board meetings with David, listening attentively as he discussed his work while carefully gathering intelligence about organizational challenges and funding opportunities that could benefit my consulting clients. Evening and weekend hours were dedicated to developing sophisticated analytical frameworks, conducting market research, and creating strategic recommendations for a growing portfolio of nonprofit organizations that had discovered my services through word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied clients. The intellectual demands of this dual existence were intense, but the satisfaction of building something meaningful while demonstrating capabilities that had been systematically undervalued was profoundly motivating. My first major success, beyond the Veterans Alliance Foundation, came through a referral from Elizabeth Hartwell to the Metropolitan Children's Hospital Foundation, which was struggling to optimize their endowment management while expanding their research funding capabilities. The foundation's board included several prominent physicians and community leaders, but their financial oversight committee lacked expertise in modern portfolio management and alternative investment strategies. The hospital foundation's endowment of $45 million was generating returns that barely exceeded inflation, severely limiting their ability to support innovative medical research and patient care programs. Traditional investment advisors had provided conservative recommendations that prioritized capital preservation over growth, leaving substantial potential value unrealized through overly cautious asset allocation strategies. My analysis revealed opportunities to enhance their returns by 15 to 20% annually through diversified international investments, strategic real estate allocations, and carefully selected alternative investments that aligned with their social mission, while generating superior financial performance. The comprehensive strategy I developed included detailed risk management protocols and performance monitoring systems that would ensure accountability while enabling more aggressive pursuit of their philanthropic objectives. The transformation plan required significant changes to their investment policies and governance structures, but the potential impact was extraordinary. Enhanced endowment performance could provide an additional $7 million annually for medical research, enough to fund 3 new laboratories and support 15 additional research fellows pursuing breakthrough treatments for pediatric diseases. Presenting these recommendations to the Hospital Foundation's board was my first experience addressing senior-level decision-makers as the primary consultant rather than as David's supportive spouse. The contrast was immediately apparent in how my expertise was received and the types of questions that board members asked about implementation strategies and risk management frameworks. Dr. Margaret Westbrook, the Foundation's chair and a renowned pediatric surgeon, was particularly impressed by the sophistication of my analysis and the clear connection between enhanced financial performance and expanded research capabilities. Her background in medical research had taught her to evaluate evidence rigorously and demand proof of concept before implementing new approaches, and my presentation provided exactly the type of detailed analysis that satisfied her standards for thorough evaluation. The board unanimously approved my recommendations and hired Morrison Strategic Consulting to manage the implementation process over the following 12 months. The engagement included ongoing monitoring responsibilities and quarterly performance reviews that would demonstrate the effectiveness of the new investment strategies while building my reputation for delivering measurable results. Success with the Hospital Foundation led to additional referrals from board members who were involved with other philanthropic organizations facing similar financial optimization challenges. Within 4 months, Morrison Strategic Consulting was managing consulting relationships with 6 major nonprofit organizations with combined assets exceeding $200 million. Each client engagement required developing customized strategies that reflected their specific mission, risk tolerance, and growth objectives while incorporating sophisticated financial analysis that leveraged my background in international markets and alternative investments. The diversity of organizations provided opportunities to develop expertise across different sectors, while building a comprehensive understanding of how philanthropic funding could be optimized to achieve maximum social impact. The Riverside Education Foundation engaged my services to restructure their scholarship funding mechanisms and develop sustainable endowment growth strategies that could support educational opportunities for underserved communities. Their existing approach to scholarship awards was reactive and limited by annual fundraising results, creating uncertainty for students and families who needed predictable access to educational support. My strategic analysis identified opportunities to establish permanent endowment funds that could provide guaranteed scholarship support while generating surplus income for program expansion. The recommended investment strategies would create sufficient annual returns to support 3 times as many scholarships within 5 years, while building reserves that could ensure program continuity during economic downturns. Implementation required coordinating with major donors who were interested in creating lasting legacies through named scholarship funds, investment managers who could execute sophisticated portfolio strategies, and educational institutions that would partner with the foundation to identify and support exceptional students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The complexity of managing these relationships while maintaining complete confidentiality about my involvement required developing new systems for client communication and project coordination. David could never know about my consulting activities, which meant that all business communications had to be conducted through secure channels that would not intersect with our shared personal or professional networks. My consulting practice was generating substantial income that I was carefully investing through offshore accounts and international investment vehicles that would remain invisible to David while building the financial foundation for long-term independence and security. The irony was profound, as David continued to view me as financially dependent on his nonprofit salary, while I was actually building a fortune that would eventually dwarf anything he could achieve through traditional employment. The strategic. Arts Initiative became my most challenging and rewarding client engagement during this period of rapid business development. This foundation supported emerging artists and innovative cultural programs, but was struggling with inefficient funding, mechanisms, and limited strategic vision that constrained their ability to identify and nurture exceptional talent. Their approach to artist support was traditional and bureaucratic, requiring extensive application processes and lengthy review cycles that often resulted in funding decisions that favored established artists over truly innovative emerging talent. Many of the most promising artists were discouraged by the complexity of their application requirements and chose to pursue other funding sources, rather than navigating their cumbersome evaluation procedures. My strategic analysis recommended complete transformation of their artist identification and support systems, implementing streamlined evaluation criteria and accelerated funding timelines that could identify exceptional talent more effectively, while providing support when artists needed it most for career development. The new approach would include mentorship programs, collaborative workspace access, and exhibition opportunities that created comprehensive support systems rather than simple financial awards. Implementation required developing partnerships with galleries, performance venues, and educational institutions that could provide infrastructure support, while the foundation focused on talent identification and financial assistance. The strategic network I designed would create synergistic relationships that enhanced opportunities for all participants while maximizing the impact of philanthropic investments. The Arts Initiative Board was initially skeptical about recommendations from a consultant with financial rather than artistic background, but their previous approaches had failed to achieve meaningful impact despite substantial funding commitments. My presentation demonstrated clear understanding of the creative process and the specific challenges that emerging artists faced in developing sustainable careers, while providing practical solutions that addressed these challenges systematically. Board Chair. Helena Morrison, a retired museum director with decades of experience in arts administration, became one of my strongest supporters after reviewing the comprehensive implementation plan and recognizing the potential for transformative impact on the cultural community. Her endorsement provided credibility with other board members who were hesitant about adopting such fundamental changes to their established procedures. The successful transformation of the Arts Initiative's operations led to recognition within philanthropic circles as an innovative consultant who could develop creative solutions to complex organizational challenges. This reputation attracted inquiries from larger foundations and more prestigious organizations that were interested in exploring strategic partnerships with Morrison Strategic Consulting. During this period of rapid client acquisition and business development, David remained completely unaware of my consulting activities or the substantial income I was generating through my independent practice. His attention was focused on his own career advancement within the Veterans Alliance Foundation and his efforts to build relationships with influential donors and board members who could support his professional goals. David's lack of curiosity about my daily activities and his assumption that I was simply maintaining our household while supporting his career provided perfect cover for the intensive work required to build and manage a successful consulting practice. He would leave for work each morning expecting that I would spend my day attending charity events and managing social obligations, and he would return each evening to find dinner prepared and household responsibilities completed, never questioning how I was utilizing the hours between his departure and arrival. The logistics of maintaining this deception required extraordinary organizational skills and strategic planning that extended far beyond normal business operations. Every client meeting had to be scheduled around David's commitments and social obligations. All business communications had to be conducted through secure channels that would not intersect with our shared technology systems, and financial transactions had to be managed through accounts that would remain invisible to someone who was not actively investigating my activities. My consulting income was being systematically invested in diversified portfolios that included international equities, alternative investments, and real estate holdings that would provide long-term growth while remaining completely separate from any financial accounts or assets that David might discover through normal household financial management activities. The sophistication of these investment strategies reflected everything I had learned during my previous career at Goldman Sachs, while incorporating new insights about philanthropic funding mechanisms and social impact investing that I was developing through my consulting work. The combination was creating exceptional returns that were building substantial wealth while supporting meaningful social causes through strategic charitable giving that enhanced my reputation within philanthropic circles. By the end of my first year operating Morrison Strategic Consulting, my client portfolio included 12 major organizations with combined assets exceeding $400 million, and my personal investment portfolio had grown to nearly $8 million through successful implementation of the strategies I was recommending to clients. The financial success was satisfying, but the intellectual fulfillment of solving complex organizational challenges while creating positive social impact was even more rewarding. I was utilizing my analytical capabilities more comprehensively than had ever been possible during my corporate career, while building relationships with people who valued strategic thinking and innovative problem-solving rather than political maneuvering and hierarchical positioning. Most importantly, I was developing confidence in my ability to create value independently of institutional support or professional credentials, while building the financial foundation that would eventually provide complete autonomy from David's diminishing expectations and systematic underestimation of my capabilities. The secret empire I was building would soon reach the critical mass necessary to support the dramatic revelation that would transform our marriage and expose the true balance of power in our relationship. David's family and friends would discover that the woman they had dismissed as his supportive housewife was actually the financial force behind many of the philanthropic initiatives they admired and the comfortable lifestyle they associated with. David's nonprofit salary was actually supported by investments I had built through strategic consulting work they never knew existed. The foundation was nearly complete, and the next phase would begin building the specific connections and opportunities that would position me to acquire the assets and influence that would make the ultimate revelation possible. The transformation of Morrison Strategic Consulting from boutique consulting practice to major philanthropic advisory firm required strategic expansion that would position the organization to influence significant asset allocation decisions while maintaining complete operational security from David's professional network. The challenge was developing sufficient scale and reputation to attract transformational opportunities while ensuring that my growing influence remained invisible to anyone who might inadvertently expose my activities to David. The solution emerged through careful analysis of philanthropic sector consolidation trends and my recognition that traditional consulting relationships were limiting my potential impact on organizational decision-making processes. Rather than simply providing strategic recommendations to foundation boards, I needed to develop ownership positions in the assets and institutions that would enable direct implementation of optimal investment strategies while generating substantial returns for my own portfolio development. Elizabeth Hartwell introduced me to Marcus Sterling, a retired investment banker who had transitioned to philanthropic advisory services after building substantial wealth through private equity acquisitions and restructuring initiatives. Sterling operated Sterling Philanthropic Partners, a firm that specialized in acquiring underperforming charitable assets and transforming their operations through professional management and sophisticated financial strategies. Sterling's approach represented exactly the type of strategic thinking that could amplify my consulting impact while providing ownership opportunities in assets that were positioned for extraordinary growth under competent management. His portfolio included educational institutions, healthcare foundations, and cultural organizations that had been struggling with governance challenges or financial mismanagement, but possessed underlying value that could be unlocked through proper strategic direction. Our initial conversation revealed mutual interest in developing partnership opportunities that would combine my analytical expertise with his acquisition experience and capital resources. Sterling was particularly impressed by my track record of delivering measurable performance improvements for consulting clients and my comprehensive understanding of international investment strategies that could be applied to philanthropic asset management. The partnership framework we developed would enable Morrison Strategic Consulting to participate in acquisition opportunities while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and avoiding conflicts of interest with existing consulting relationships. Sterling would identify acquisition targets and provide initial capital, while I would conduct due diligence analysis and develop transformation strategies that would optimize operational performance and financial returns. Our first collaborative acquisition involved the Brookstone Cultural Center, a struggling arts institution that owned valuable real estate in downtown Boston, but lacked the financial management expertise necessary to leverage their assets effectively. The center was facing potential bankruptcy, despite owning property worth $12 million and maintaining relationships with prominent artists and cultural organizations throughout New England. My analysis revealed that the center's financial difficulties resulted from poor strategic planning rather than fundamental operational problems. Their programming was well regarded and consistently attracted audiences, but their revenue models were outdated and their facility utilization was inefficient. The board of directors consisted primarily of elderly community leaders who lacked experience with modern nonprofit management practices and had been resistant to implementing necessary operational changes. The acquisition strategy I developed would preserve the center's cultural mission while restructuring their financial operations to achieve sustainability and growth. This approach included developing new revenue streams through expanded programming, optimizing facility rental income through strategic partnerships, and implementing sophisticated investment management for their endowment funds. Sterling provided the initial capital necessary to acquire the center's assets and assume responsibility for their debt obligations, while Morrison Strategic Consulting received equity participation and ongoing management responsibilities for implementing the transformation plan. This structure allowed me to demonstrate comprehensive organizational leadership capabilities while generating substantial returns through successful asset optimization. The Brookstone Cultural Center acquisition required extensive coordination with local government officials, cultural organizations, and community stakeholders who were concerned about preserving the institution's mission and programming quality during the transition to new ownership. These relationships provided valuable insights into municipal decision-making processes and introduced me to influential community leaders who would prove essential for future acquisition opportunities. Mayor Patricia Rodriguez of Boston became a particularly valuable contact through her involvement in reviewing the acquisition proposal and ensuring that community interests were protected during the ownership transition. Rodriguez had built her political career through effective economic development initiatives and strategic partnerships with private investors who could contribute to municipal growth while supporting public objectives. Her approach to public-private partnerships reflected sophisticated understanding of how philanthropic investments could be structured to achieve social impact while generating returns that would attract additional private capital for community development projects. This perspective aligned perfectly with my strategic vision for expanding Morrison Strategic Consulting's influence through asset acquisition and community partnership development. Rodriguez introduced me to several municipal development opportunities that required private investment combined with philanthropic support to achieve optimal outcomes for community stakeholders. These projects included affordable housing development, educational infrastructure improvement, and cultural facility expansion initiatives that offered exceptional potential for both social impact and financial returns. The Massachusetts Educational Development Trust became my second major acquisition opportunity through Rodriguez's recommendation and Sterling's capital support. This organization managed scholarship funding for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, but had accumulated significant surplus reserves through conservative investment strategies that were generating minimal returns, while potential beneficiaries remained underserved. The trust controlled assets worth $28 million, but was providing scholarships to fewer than 200 students annually due to restrictive investment policies that prioritized capital preservation over growth. My analysis demonstrated that optimal portfolio management could double their annual scholarship awards while building reserves that would ensure program sustainability during economic downturns. The acquisition required extensive negotiations with the Trust's board of directors and state education officials, who maintained oversight responsibilities for charitable educational organizations. The complexity of these discussions provided valuable experience in regulatory compliance and stakeholder management that would prove essential for future expansion initiatives. My presentation to the State Education Review Committee demonstrated comprehensive understanding of educational funding mechanisms and student success metrics that impressed review panel members and established my credibility as a serious participant in educational philanthropy. Committee Chair, Dr. Sarah Chen, a former university president with extensive experience in higher education administration, became an important advocate for the acquisition proposal and subsequent strategic partnerships. Dr. Chen's endorsement provided access to additional acquisition opportunities within the educational sector and introduced me to influential academic leaders who controlled substantial assets and decision-making authority for major educational institutions throughout the Northeast Corridor. These relationships would prove crucial for developing the network of contacts and resources that would support increasingly ambitious acquisition strategies. The successful transformation of both the Brookstone Cultural Center and Massachusetts Educational Development Trust within the first year of operation demonstrated the effectiveness of my strategic approach and attracted attention from larger institutional investors who were interested in participating in similar opportunities. Sterling Philanthropic Partners received inquiries from pension funds, university endowments, and family foundations that wanted to explore partnerships for acquiring and optimizing philanthropic assets. This increased investor interest enabled expansion of our acquisition activities while providing access to capital resources that could support larger and more complex transactions. The growth trajectory positioned Morrison Strategic Consulting to pursue transformational opportunities that would create substantial wealth while generating significant social impact through improved organizational effectiveness. During this period of rapid business expansion, David remained completely focused on his own career advancement within the Veterans Alliance Foundation and showed no curiosity about my daily activities or the source of our increasingly comfortable lifestyle. His assumption that I was simply maintaining our household while supporting his professional development provided perfect operational security for managing complex acquisition activities and investor relationships. The irony was becoming increasingly apparent as David discussed his modest salary increases and professional achievements, while our household expenses were actually being supported by investment returns from my rapidly expanding portfolio of philanthropic assets. His pride in providing financial security for our family was based on complete ignorance of the actual sources of our economic stability and social status. My strategic investment activities were generating annual returns that exceeded David's total compensation by substantial margins, but his lack of interest in household financial management ensured that he remained unaware of our true financial position. The investment accounts and asset holdings that were providing our economic foundation existed completely outside his awareness or understanding. The third major acquisition opportunity emerged through Dr. Chen's introduction to the Riverside Vineyard Estate, a struggling winery in Sonoma County that had been donated to a charitable foundation but was being managed ineffectively by trustees who lacked expertise in agricultural operations or hospitality industry management. The property included 300 acres of premium vineyard land, production facilities, and event venues that were ideally positioned for luxury wine production and exclusive event hosting. The vineyard's current operations were generating minimal revenue despite controlling assets worth $45 million and maintaining relationships with distributors and hospitality partners throughout California and the Pacific Northwest. The foundation trustees were considering selling the property to commercial developers rather than investing the resources necessary to optimize its operational potential. My analysis revealed extraordinary opportunities to transform the vineyard into a profitable enterprise while maintaining its charitable mission through educational programming and community engagement initiatives. The strategic plan I developed would establish the vineyard as a premier destination for corporate events, charitable fundraising activities, and educational programs while producing high-quality wines that could command premium pricing in luxury markets. The acquisition required coordination with California state authorities who regulated charitable asset transfers and winery operations, local government officials who controlled land use and development permissions, and industry partners who would provide distribution and marketing support for the transformed operations. Sterling provided the capital necessary to acquire the vineyard assets and fund initial operational improvements, while Morrison Strategic Consulting received substantial equity participation and complete management authority for implementing the transformation strategy. This structure positioned me to demonstrate comprehensive business leadership capabilities while building significant personal wealth through successful agricultural and hospitality operations. The vineyard acquisition would prove particularly significant for the ultimate revelation that would transform my marriage, as the property would become the venue for David's brother's wedding and the location where David would make his devastating comment about our marriage being his biggest regret. The irony that he would express these sentiments while standing on property that I owned and had transformed into a successful enterprise would provide the perfect context for revealing the true sources of our family's prosperity and social status. The foundation for this revelation was being carefully constructed through strategic asset acquisition and wealth development activities that remained completely invisible to David while positioning me to demonstrate the scope of my achievements. When the appropriate moment arrived for exposing the reality of our financial relationship, the architecture of influence I was building through Morrison Strategic Consulting and my partnership with Sterling Philanthropic Partners would soon provide the platform necessary to reveal that everything David valued about our lifestyle and social position had been funded through my independent success, rather than his modest nonprofit salary. The success of the Riverside Vineyard transformation established Morrison Strategic Consulting as a premier player in philanthropic asset optimization, attracting attention from institutional investors and wealthy philanthropists who recognized the exceptional returns generated through sophisticated strategic management. The vineyard's financial performance exceeded projections by 40% during its first year under my management, while simultaneously expanding its charitable programming and community engagement initiatives. The vineyard's success created a demonstration model that validated my approach to combining profit optimization with social impact, attracting inquiries from foundations and wealthy individuals who controlled substantial assets, but lacked the expertise necessary to maximize their philanthropic effectiveness. This recognition positioned Morrison Strategic Consulting to pursue increasingly ambitious opportunities that would establish permanent influence within philanthropic circles while building substantial personal wealth. Dr. Patricia Blackwood, former Secretary of Education and current president of the Hamilton Institute for Policy Research, approached me through Dr. Chen's recommendation to discuss strategic consulting for the Institute's $50 million endowment restructuring initiative. The Hamilton Institute was struggling to balance their commitment to independent policy research with funding constraints that were limiting their ability to attract top-tier researchers and maintain operational excellence. Blackwood's reputation for intellectual rigor and policy innovation made the Hamilton Institute engagement particularly valuable for establishing credibility within academic and policy circles. Her endorsement would provide access to university presidents, think tank directors, and government officials who controlled substantial resources and decision-making authority for major educational and research institutions. The Institute's endowment had been managed conservatively by traditional investment advisors who prioritized capital preservation over growth, resulting in returns that barely exceeded inflation, while research funding demands continued increasing due to rising operational costs and competitive pressures for attracting exceptional faculty members. My comprehensive analysis revealed opportunities to enhance endowment performance by 25% annually through diversified international investments, strategic private equity allocations, and alternative investments in educational technology companies that aligned with the Institute's research mission while generating superior financial returns. The transformation strategy I developed included detailed implementation timelines, risk management protocols, and performance monitoring systems that would ensure accountability while enabling more aggressive pursuit of growth objectives. The enhanced endowment performance would provide an additional $10 million annually for research initiatives, enough to fund 5 new research centers and support 20 additional senior researchers pursuing breakthrough policy innovations. Blackwood was impressed by the sophistication of my analysis and the clear connection between enhanced financial performance and expanded research capabilities. Her background in education policy had taught her to evaluate proposals rigorously and demand evidence-based implementation strategies, and my presentation provided exactly the type of detailed analysis that satisfied her standards for thorough evaluation. The Hamilton Institute Board unanimously approved my recommendations and engaged Morrison Strategic Consulting for a comprehensive 3-year transformation initiative that would include ongoing portfolio management responsibilities and quarterly performance reviews. The engagement provided substantial consulting income while establishing my reputation within academic circles as an innovative strategist who could deliver measurable results. Success with the Hamilton Institute led to introductions to Chancellor Rebecca Morrison of the State University System, who was responsible for investment oversight of the system's combined endowments, worth $800 million. Morrison had been searching for innovative approaches to endowment management that could generate enhanced returns while supporting the university system's commitment to accessible education and research excellence. The university system engagement represented the largest consulting opportunity I had pursued, with potential to influence investment decisions affecting hundreds of thousands of students and thousands of faculty members across 12 campuses. The complexity of coordinating investment strategies across multiple institutions while maintaining appropriate governance oversight required developing sophisticated management systems and stakeholder communication protocols. My strategic analysis identified opportunities to consolidate investment management functions while implementing diversified portfolio strategies that could enhance system-wide returns by 15% annually. The improvement would generate an additional $120 million annually for academic programming, research support, and student financial assistance. Implementation required extensive coordination with individual campus administrators, faculty governance committees, and state education officials who maintained oversight responsibilities for public university financial management. The complexity of these negotiations provided valuable experience in large-scale institutional transformation while building relationships with influential academic leaders throughout the state system. Chancellor Morrison became one of my strongest professional advocates after reviewing the preliminary results of the endowment restructuring initiative. Her support provided access to the Association of Public University Presidents, where I was invited to present my innovative approaches to endowment optimization and strategic philanthropy at their annual conference. The conference presentation established my national reputation as a leading expert in educational asset management and attracted inquiries from university systems and major foundations across the country. This recognition positioned Morrison Strategic Consulting to pursue transformational opportunities that would create substantial wealth while generating significant social impact through improved educational effectiveness. During this period of rapid professional expansion, my personal investment portfolio had grown to exceed $30 million through strategic reinvestment of consulting income and successful management of acquired assets. The vineyard operations alone were generating annual profits of $4 million while maintaining their charitable programming and community engagement initiatives. The financial success enabled expansion of my acquisition activities through increased partnership investments with Sterling Philanthropic Partners and direct asset purchases that provided complete operational control over strategic transformation initiatives. This ownership approach allowed me to implement optimal management strategies without the constraints typically imposed by traditional consulting relationships. The Coastal Marine Research Foundation became my 4th major acquisition. Through Chancellor Morrison's introduction to marine science funding opportunities, The foundation controlled valuable oceanfront research facilities and marine conservation assets, but was struggling with operational inefficiencies and limited strategic vision that constrained their ability to support innovative research initiatives. The Port Foundation's assets included 3 research stations along the Atlantic coast, specialized marine research equipment, and extensive databases of oceanographic and marine biology research that were underutilized due to poor coordination between research initiatives and limited technology infrastructure for data analysis and sharing. My acquisition strategy would modernize the Foundation's operations while expanding their research capabilities through strategic partnerships with universities and government agencies conducting marine science research. The transformation plan included technology upgrades, facility improvements, and program expansion that would establish the Foundation as a premier center for marine research and education. Sterling provided acquisition capital, while Morrison Strategic Consulting received substantial equity participation and complete management authority for implementing the operational transformation. The structure positioned me to demonstrate comprehensive leadership capabilities in scientific asset management while building additional wealth through successful research facility optimization. The Marine Research Foundation acquisition required coordination with federal agencies that regulated marine research activities, environmental organizations concerned about conservation mission preservation, and academic institutions that would partner with the Foundation for expanded research programming. These negotiations introduced me to Admiral Susan Martinez, former Commandant of the Coast Guard and current director of the National Ocean Policy Institute. Martinez had extensive experience in marine security and environmental protection issues, and her endorsement provided credibility with government officials and environmental organizations that were evaluating the acquisition proposal. Martinez became an important strategic advisor for the Marine Research Foundation transformation and introduced me to federal officials responsible for marine science funding and policy development. These relationships would prove valuable for securing government research contracts and collaborative funding opportunities that could enhance the Foundation's operational sustainability while supporting important national security and environmental research objectives. The successful acquisition and transformation of 4 major philanthropic assets within 18 months demonstrated the effectiveness of my strategic approach and established Morrison Strategic Consulting as a dominant force in philanthropics. Asset optimization. The combined portfolio generated annual revenues exceeding $15 million while supporting charitable programming that benefited thousands of individuals and organizations. More importantly, the success had built a network of influential relationships that extended across academic, government, and philanthropic sectors. These connections provided access to information and opportunities that would have been impossible to obtain through traditional consulting relationships or corporate employment. The contrast between my expanding influence and David's continued focus on his modest role within the Veterans Alliance Foundation was becoming increasingly apparent, though he remained completely unaware of my professional activities or our true financial position. His pride in his nonprofit work and assumption that his salary provided our economic foundation created perfect operational security for my increasingly complex business operations. David's lack of curiosity about household finances or my daily activities enabled me to manage substantial asset portfolios and international investment strategies without any risk of inadvertent exposure. His assumption that I was simply maintaining our home while supporting his career provided ideal cover for managing consulting relationships with some of the most influential organizations and individuals in the country. The irony was particularly striking during David's discussions with colleagues about their shared frustrations with limited nonprofit salaries and their admiration for individuals who had achieved financial success through business ventures. David would express envy for entrepreneurs and investors who had built substantial wealth while remaining completely ignorant that his wife had achieved exactly the type of success he claimed to admire. Our social interactions within David's professional network had become increasingly uncomfortable as his colleagues began noticing improvements in our lifestyle that seemed inconsistent with his nonprofit salary. Our home renovations, vacation travel, and social activities reflected economic resources that exceeded what would be reasonable based on his known income. But David deflected questions by attributing our comfortable lifestyle to careful budgeting and modest family financial support. The deception was becoming more difficult to maintain as our actual economic status diverged further from David's public financial narrative. However, his commitment to portraying himself as the primary breadwinner ensured that he would continue, providing explanations that concealed my professional activities while taking credit for financial security that he had not created. This dynamic was building toward an inevitable confrontation that would expose the reality of our economic relationship and demonstrate the scope of my achievements to everyone who had witnessed my systematic diminishment over the years of our marriage. The foundation for this revelation was being carefully constructed through strategic asset acquisition and wealth development that remained completely invisible to David, while positioning me to demonstrate my actual capabilities when circumstances required honest disclosure. The announcement of David's brother Michael's engagement to Alexandra Pemberton created the perfect opportunity for this revelation to occur in a context that would maximize its impact while providing appropriate dramatic setting for exposing the true sources of our family's prosperity and social status. Michael Harrison had always represented everything that David aspired to achieve professionally and socially. As a partner at a prestigious law firm specializing in corporate mergers and acquisitions, Michael commanded substantial income and social recognition that David envied despite his public commitment to nonprofit service. Michael's engagement to Alexandra, daughter of prominent real estate developers, would create a wedding celebration that would attract influential guests and require substantial financial resources for appropriate hosting. David's excitement about serving as best man for Michael's wedding reflected his desire to demonstrate his own success and social status to family members and professional contacts who would attend the celebration. His assumption that our comfortable lifestyle qualified him to participate as an equal in such an prestigious social event revealed his complete ignorance of the actual economic requirements for maintaining credibility within such exclusive circles. The wedding planning discussions provided opportunities to observe David's growing sense of entitlement and his increasing willingness to diminish my contributions while taking credit for achievements and resources that he had not created. His behavior during these family interactions would ultimately provide the catalyst for the dramatic revelation that would transform our marriage and expose the hidden empire I had built while he focused on his modest nonprofit career. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would demonstrate that the woman he had systematically undervalued and dismissed had actually built the financial foundation that supported everything he valued about our shared life and social position. The announcement of Michael Harrison's engagement to Alexandra Pemberton triggered a transformation in David's behavior that revealed the depths of his entitlement and his fundamental misunderstanding of our actual financial position. Michael's wedding planning process would require substantial family contributions and social positioning that David assumed we could provide based on what he perceived as our comfortable lifestyle, completely unaware that our economic resources exceeded anything his family had ever imagined. Alexandra Pemberton represented everything that David's family aspirated to achieve socially and financially. Her father, Robert Pemberton, had built a real estate empire worth several $100 million through strategic commercial development projects throughout the Northeast Corridor. Her mother, Victoria Pemberton, served on the boards of multiple cultural institutions and had established herself as a prominent figure in philanthropic circles through substantial charitable giving and sophisticated social networking. The Pemberton family's expectations for Michael and Alexandra's wedding reflected their social status and financial capabilities, requiring venue arrangements, catering services, and entertainment options that would cost several $100,000 while demonstrating appropriate sophistication for their social circle. Michael's income as a law firm partner was substantial, but insufficient to fund such an elaborate celebration without significant family financial support. David immediately volunteered our assistance with wedding planning and financial contributions, making commitments that he assumed we could honor, based on his perception of our household's economic situation. His enthusiasm for participating in such a prestigious social event reflected his desire to demonstrate equality with his brother's professional success, while showcasing our supposed financial prosperity to extended family members and influential guests. The irony was profound, as David made increasingly grandiose offers of support while remaining completely ignorant of the actual sources of our economic stability. His assumption that his nonprofit salary provided sufficient resources for substantial wedding contributions revealed his fundamental disconnect from household financial reality and his complete lack of awareness regarding my professional activities and investment portfolio performance. The first significant conflict emerged when Michael and Alexandra requested assistance with venue selection and booking arrangements. They had identified several exclusive locations, but were struggling to secure reservations at properties that required substantial deposits and demonstrated financial credentials for hosting such elaborate celebrations. David immediately suggested that we could provide venue assistance through our social connections, claiming that our involvement with charitable organizations had given us access to exclusive facilities and preferred vendor relationships. His confidence in making such offers reflected his assumption that my attendance at charity events had created the type of social network that could facilitate luxury wedding arrangements. The request provided a perfect opportunity to demonstrate the actual scope of my professional influence, while revealing the sources of our economic resources in a context that would maximize impact on David's understanding of our relationship dynamics. Rather than simply declining to help or admitting that David had overcommitted our capabilities, I decided to provide exactly the type of assistance he had promised, while exposing the reality of how such assistance would be possible. I contacted the management team at Riverside Vineyard Estate and arranged for Michael and Alexandra to visit the property for a private consultation about hosting their wedding celebration at one of California's most exclusive venues. The vineyard's reputation for sophisticated events and premium wine production made it an ideal location for the type of celebration that would satisfy the Pemberton family's expectations while providing appropriate setting for demonstrating our actual social and economic status. David was thrilled by my apparent success in securing access to such a prestigious venue, attributing my ability to arrange the consultation to social connections he assumed I had developed through charity event attendance. His excitement about presenting this opportunity to Michael and Alexandra reflected his desire to demonstrate our sophisticated social network and substantial resources to family members who had previously viewed him as the less successful brother. The vineyard consultation exceeded Michael and Alexandra's expectations for venue quality and event capabilities, while providing pricing options that were competitive with other exclusive locations they had been considering. The property's combination of natural beauty, sophisticated facilities, and exceptional wine production created exactly the type of unique celebration setting that would distinguish their wedding from conventional luxury hotel or country club events. Alexandra was particularly impressed by the vineyard's commitment to sustainable agriculture and community engagement programming, which aligned with her personal values regarding environmental responsibility and social impact. Her enthusiasm for the venue reflected sophisticated understanding of how wedding location choices could demonstrate the couple's shared values while providing memorable experiences for their guests. The venue booking process required substantial deposit payments and financial documentation that demonstrated our ability to guarantee payment for comprehensive event services. David assumed that we would need to arrange financing or payment plans to manage such significant expenses, completely unaware that the required deposits represented a small fraction of my available liquid assets. When the vineyard management team requested financial verification for securing the booking, I provided documentation that demonstrated liquid asset holdings sufficient to cover the entire wedding cost without financing arrangements or extended payment schedules. The financial credentials I presented exceeded the vineyard management team's typical client profiles and resulted in preferred pricing and premium service arrangements that enhanced the overall event package value. David's reaction to learning about our apparent financial capabilities revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of our household's economic position and his assumption that such resources must have originated through family inheritance or other sources that he had not previously considered. His inability to connect our financial strength with my professional activities demonstrated the effectiveness of the operational security I had maintained throughout my consulting practice development. The wedding planning process intensified David's tendency to diminish my contributions while taking credit for achievements and resources that he had not created. During family planning meetings, he would present our venue assistance and financial capabilities as reflections of his professional success and strategic planning, minimizing my role to simple implementation of his directives and social networking. This pattern became particularly pronounced during discussions with Michael and Alexandra about additional wedding support services, including catering coordination, entertainment arrangements, and guest accommodation logistics. David positioned himself as the primary decision-maker for our family's contributions, while describing my involvement as helpful assistance with details and coordination tasks. The characterization was especially frustrating because the vendor relationships and service provider connections that enabled our comprehensive wedding support had been developed through my professional consulting work and strategic philanthropy activities. The preferred pricing and premium service arrangements that impressed Michael and Alexandra resulted from my established reputation within luxury service industries rather than any social connections that David had developed. Michael's growing respect for David's apparent resource management capabilities and strategic planning expertise reflected his complete ignorance of the actual sources of our wedding planning success. His praise for David's sophisticated approach to vendor management and financial coordination reinforced David's inflated sense of his own capabilities while encouraging continued minimization of my contributions. The dynamic reached a particularly troubling point when Alexandra asked me directly about my background and professional experience, expressing curiosity about my apparent expertise in event planning and vendor relationship management. Her questions provided an opportunity to discuss my actual professional accomplishments and the sources of our sophisticated social network, but David immediately interjected to redirect the conversation toward his nonprofit work and charitable activities. David's interference in my conversation with Alexandra demonstrated his need to control information about our household's capabilities while ensuring that any impressive achievements or resources would be attributed to his efforts rather than my independent success. His systematic interruption of my attempts to engage in substantive conversation revealed his fear that direct interaction might expose his lack of understanding regarding our actual circumstances. The interference was particularly ironic given that Alexandra's background in sustainable business development and social impact investing aligned perfectly with my consulting work in philanthropic asset optimization. Her professional interests would have created natural conversation topics that could have led to meaningful professional connections and potential collaboration opportunities. But David's insistence on controlling social interactions prevented such relationship development. The wedding budget discussions provided additional opportunities to observe David's growing sense of entitlement and his willingness to make financial commitments that exceeded his understanding of our actual resources. When Michael mentioned concerns about overall celebration costs, David immediately offered to increase our financial contribution, while assuring his brother that cost considerations should not compromise their vision for the perfect wedding celebration. David's confident offers of enhanced financial support reflected his assumption that our household commanded substantially greater resources than he had previously realized, but his lack of curiosity about the sources of such wealth demonstrated his commitment to maintaining comfortable illusions about his role as primary breadwinner and financial decision-maker. The offers also revealed his willingness to make commitments without consulting me about our financial capabilities or preferences regarding such substantial expenditures. His assumption that he could unilaterally determine our level of wedding financial participation reflected his view of our marriage as a hierarchy where his decisions would naturally take precedence over my preferences or concerns. During this period of intensive wedding planning, My consulting practice continued expanding through new client acquisitions and enhanced service offerings that generated substantial additional income while building my professional reputation within philanthropic and academic circles. The Morrison Strategic Consulting portfolio now included 17 major organizations with combined assets exceeding $1 billion, while my personal investment holdings had grown to approximately $45 million through successful asset management and strategic reinvestment. The contrast between my expanding professional influence and David's limited nonprofit role was becoming increasingly apparent to outside observers, though David himself remained completely focused on his modest achievements while taking credit for lifestyle improvements and social connections that resulted from my independent success. The most revealing incident occurred during a family dinner, where David's parents expressed admiration for our apparent prosperity and sophisticated social network, praising David for his successful career development and financial management capabilities. David accepted their praise enthusiastically while providing detailed explanations of his strategic approach to career advancement and resource optimization. His presentation completely omitted any mention of my professional activities or contributions to our household's economic success, instead attributing our prosperity to his careful planning and nonprofit sector expertise. The fictional narrative he created portrayed me as a supportive spouse whose primary contributions involved household management and social coordination tasks that complemented his professional achievements. The deception was particularly troubling because David appeared to genuinely believe his own narrative, rather than consciously misrepresenting our circumstances. His ability to maintain such comprehensive self-deception while accepting praise for achievements he had not accomplished demonstrated the psychological mechanisms that had enabled his systematic diminishment of my capabilities throughout our marriage. David's parents were impressed by his apparent transformation from struggling nonprofit employee to sophisticated social participant who could provide substantial financial support for luxury family celebrations. Their pride in his supposed achievements reinforced his inflated self-perception, while encouraging continued dismissal of my actual contributions to our household's success and social status. The wedding planning process was building toward the ultimate revelation that would expose David's fundamental misunderstanding of our relationship dynamics and demonstrate the scope of my hidden achievements. The venue selection, financial arrangements, and social coordination that he had claimed credit for would be revealed as products of my professional expertise and independent wealth, rather than his strategic planning and career success. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would occur in the presence of family members and influential guests who had witnessed David's systematic appropriation of credit for achievements he had not accomplished. The revelation would demonstrate that the woman he had consistently diminished and marginalized had actually built the foundation that supported everything he valued about our shared social status and economic prosperity. The crescendo of David's entitlement and arrogance was approaching its peak, creating the perfect conditions for a dramatic reversal that would transform everyone's understanding of our marriage dynamics and expose the true sources of our households, sophisticated lifestyle, and substantial resources. The 6 months preceding Michael and Alexandra's wedding marked the most intensive period of David's systematic dismissal of my capabilities, as his inflated confidence from the wedding planning success translated into increasingly bold assertions about his professional expertise and household authority. The disparity between his perception of our circumstances and the reality of my hidden empire had reached proportions that made his behavior almost comically delusional. Yet the psychological impact of his constant diminishment remained profoundly damaging. David's assumption that our sophisticated lifestyle and substantial resources reflected his strategic career management led him to believe that he had finally achieved the type of professional success that warranted treating me as a dependent rather than a partner. His confidence in this narrative was reinforced by the admiration he received from family members and colleagues who were impressed by our apparent prosperity and his supposed financial acumen. The Veterans Alliance Foundation had promoted David to Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships, a position that involved coordinating with other nonprofit organizations and government agencies to develop collaborative funding initiatives. While the promotion represented genuine recognition of his competence within the nonprofit sector, the enhanced title and modest salary increase bore no relationship to the dramatic improvement in our lifestyle that had occurred during the same period. Nevertheless, David interpreted his promotion as validation of his strategic thinking and professional capabilities, leading him to believe that his career advancement explained our household's economic transformation. His acceptance speeches and professional networking conversations increasingly emphasized his innovative approaches to partnership development and resource optimization, as though these modest achievements could account for the sophisticated social network and substantial financial resources that supported our elevated lifestyle. The psychological mechanism that enabled David to maintain such comprehensive self-deception while accepting credit for achievements he had not accomplished was fascinating from an analytical perspective, though deeply troubling as his spouse who bore the impact of his systematic reality distortion. His need to believe in his own primary breadwinner narrative had become so essential to his self-concept that he unconsciously filtered information to preserve comfortable illusions about our relationship dynamics. This cognitive distortion manifested most clearly during social interactions where my professional background or expertise might naturally emerge in conversation. David had developed sophisticated techniques for redirecting discussions away from topics where my knowledge might exceed his understanding, while positioning himself as the authoritative voice on subjects ranging from financial management to strategic planning. During a charity fundraising dinner for the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Dr. Helen Richardson, a prominent art historian and museum board member, engaged me in conversation about the economic challenges facing cultural institutions in post-recession funding environments. Her questions about endowment management and alternative revenue development reflected genuine interest in my professional perspective on issues that directly affected her institutional responsibilities. My response drew upon extensive experience with cultural organization consulting through Morrison Strategic Consulting, including specific insights about innovative funding mechanisms and strategic partnerships that could enhance financial sustainability while preserving mission integrity. The conversation was intellectually stimulating and professionally relevant, representing exactly the type of substantive engagement that had been missing from most social interactions within David's network. Dr. Richardson was clearly impressed by the sophistication of my analysis and the practical applicability of my recommendations to her institution's specific challenges. Her follow-up questions demonstrated genuine interest in exploring potential consulting relationships that could benefit the museum's strategic planning initiatives while advancing best practices within the cultural philanthropy sector. However, David's intervention in our conversation demonstrated his systematic approach to controlling information about my capabilities, while ensuring that any impressive insights or recommendations would be attributed to his influence rather than my independent expertise. His interruption was smoothly executed and superficially polite, but the underlying message was unmistakable. Substantive professional conversation was his domain, and my role was limited to supportive social interaction. David's redirection technique involved acknowledging my comments as interesting observations, while subtly suggesting that my insights reflected ideas we had discussed privately rather than independent professional analysis. This approach allowed him to maintain social courtesy while establishing himself as the source of sophisticated strategic thinking that I was simply conveying to interested listeners. The manipulation was particularly insidious because it appeared supportive of my intellectual engagement, while actually undermining my professional credibility and establishing David as the authoritative voice on subjects where my expertise significantly exceeded his understanding. Dr. Richardson's gradual shift of attention from my analysis to David's commentary demonstrated the effectiveness of his social positioning techniques. Similar patterns emerged during interactions with other influential individuals who attended the cultural and philanthropic events that comprised our social schedule. David had become increasingly skilled at intercepting conversations where my Professional background might naturally lead to meaningful networking opportunities or business development discussions. His technique for managing these situations involved expressing pride in my intelligence and analytical capabilities, while characterizing my insights as reflections of his mentorship and guidance rather than independent professional accomplishments. This approach allowed him to accept praise for sophisticated strategic thinking, while maintaining the narrative that I was primarily a supportive spouse whose contributions derived from his instruction and oversight. The pattern was particularly evident during a reception for the National Education Foundation, where Chancellor Morrison introduced me to several university presidents and foundation directors who were interested in discussing endowment optimization strategies. My reputation within academic circles had grown substantially through my consulting work with major educational institutions, and these conversations represented opportunities to expand my professional network while potentially developing new client relationships. However, David's systematic interference in these discussions prevented the natural development of professional connections that might have led to consulting opportunities or collaborative initiatives. His insistence on participating in conversations about educational finance and strategic planning, despite his limited background in these areas, consistently redirected attention away from my expertise while positioning him as the primary contact for any future professional interaction. The interference was professionally damaging because it suggested that my analytical capabilities were subordinate to David's oversight and approval, undermining the independent credibility necessary for serious consulting relationships. Potential clients who might have engaged Morrison's strategic consulting based on direct conversation with me instead received the impression that David was the primary strategic thinker in our household, with my contributions representing implementation, support, rather than original analysis. During this period of intensified social positioning and professional interference, my consulting practice continued expanding through existing client relationships and referrals that bypassed David's social network entirely. The Morrison Strategic Consulting portfolio had grown to include 23 major organizations with combined assets exceeding $1.4 billion, while my personal investment holdings had reached $62 million through successful asset management and strategic acquisitions. The financial growth was accelerating as my reputation within philanthropic circles attracted increasingly substantial consulting engagements and partnership opportunities. The Riverside Vineyard had become profitable beyond initial projections, generating annual returns that exceeded $8 million while maintaining its charitable programming and sustainable agriculture initiatives. The Marine Research Foundation had successfully secured federal research contracts worth $12 million through strategic partnerships with government agencies and academic institutions, while the Educational Development Trust had expanded its scholarship programming to support more than 800 students annually through optimized endowment management. Each successful transformation enhanced my professional reputation while generating substantial consulting income that was systematically reinvested in diversified portfolios designed to build long-term wealth and financial independence. The compound growth effect was creating extraordinary returns that positioned me among the most successful strategic consultants in the philanthropic sector. The irony of my expanding professional influence occurring simultaneously with David's intensified efforts to control my social and professional interactions was becoming increasingly apparent to outside observers, though David himself remained completely focused on his modest achievements while dismissing any suggestions that my contributions might exceed his understanding. The contradiction between our apparent lifestyle and David's known income had become so pronounced that several of his colleagues began making subtle inquiries about alternative income sources or family financial support that might explain our sophisticated social activities and substantial charitable giving. David's responses to these questions revealed his commitment to maintaining fictional narratives about his financial capabilities rather than acknowledging any uncertainty about our household's economic foundation. During a conversation with his supervisor at the Veterans Alliance Foundation, David confidently attributed our prosperity to his strategic approach to career development and investment management, claiming that his nonprofit experience had provided unique insights into philanthropic funding mechanisms that enabled superior investment returns. His explanation was sufficiently vague to avoid specific claims that could be easily verified, while creating the impression that he possessed sophisticated financial expertise beyond his evident professional capabilities. The supervisor's reaction suggested skepticism about David's financial narrative, but professional courtesy prevented direct challenges to claims that were obviously exaggerated or implausible. However, the conversation demonstrated that David's professional credibility was beginning to suffer as the disparity between his modest salary and our apparent lifestyle became impossible to ignore. The wedding planning process had entered its final phase, with detailed coordination required for vendor management, guest logistics, and event execution at the Riverside Vineyard. The complexity of managing such an elaborate celebration required sophisticated project management capabilities and extensive vendor relationship coordination that exceeded anything Michael and Alexandra had previously undertaken. David had volunteered to oversee comprehensive wedding coordination, presenting himself as the family member with sufficient organizational expertise and vendor relationships to ensure flawless event execution. His confidence in accepting such substantial responsibility reflected his assumption that the successful venue selection process demonstrated his capability for managing complex social events and luxury service coordination. The reality was that the Vineyard's event management team would handle most operational details through established protocols and vendor relationships that I had developed during the property's transformation into a premier wedding destination. David's coordination role would primarily involve approving decisions that had already been optimized through professional event planning expertise and strategic vendor partnerships. Nevertheless, David's family members were impressed by his apparent willingness to accept responsibility for such an important celebration, interpreting his confidence as evidence of sophisticated event management capabilities and substantial social network resources. Their praise for his initiative and strategic thinking reinforced his inflated self-perception, while encouraging continued appropriation of credit for achievements he had not accomplished. The wedding guest list included several individuals from my professional network who had developed business relationships with Morrison Strategic Consulting, but remained unaware of my marriage to David or his role within the Veterans Alliance Foundation. Their attendance would create potential complications if professional conversations revealed the scope of my consulting practice and the sources of our sophisticated social connections. However, the operational security I had maintained throughout my business development activities ensured that these professional contacts knew me by my maiden name and had no reason to connect my consulting work with David's household circumstances or social activities. The compartmentalization would protect my business relationships while preventing inadvertent exposure of my hidden professional empire. The approaching wedding celebration represented the culmination of months of increasing tension between David's inflated self-perception and the reality of our relationship dynamics. His systematic appropriation of credit for achievements he had not accomplished, combined with his intensified efforts to control my social and professional interactions, had created psychological pressure that would eventually require resolution. Through honest disclosure about our actual circumstances, the revelation would occur in the presence of family members and influential guests who had witnessed David's systematic diminishment of my capabilities while accepting his fictional narratives about our household's prosperity and social status. The dramatic reversal would demonstrate that the woman he had consistently marginalized and controlled had actually built the foundation that supported everything he valued about our shared lifestyle and professional reputation. The architecture of David's condescension was approaching its structural limits, creating the perfect conditions for a confrontation that would expose the reality of our marriage dynamics while revealing the extraordinary achievements that had remained hidden throughout years of systematic underestimation and professional interference. The final month before Michael and Alexandra's wedding represented the pinnacle of David's transformation from dismissive spouse to completely delusional household dictator. His confidence in his fictional narrative about our circumstances had reached such extraordinary heights that he began making statements and commitments that revealed the profound disconnect between his self-perception and reality. The approaching celebration would provide the perfect stage for exposing this delusion in a context that would maximize the impact on everyone who had witnessed his systematic appropriation of achievements he had never accomplished. David's behavior during the wedding preparation intensified beyond anything I had previously experienced in our marriage. His assumption that the successful venue arrangement and financial coordination demonstrated his sophisticated social network and strategic planning capabilities led him to believe that he had finally achieved the professional status that warranted complete authority over household decisions and social interactions. The transformation was most apparent during conversations with vendors and service providers who were coordinating various aspects of the wedding celebration. David positioned himself as the primary decision-maker for all arrangements, speaking with authority about preferences and requirements that reflected his complete ignorance of the actual logistics involved in managing such a sophisticated event. During a conference call with the catering director from Riverside Vineyard, David provided detailed instructions about menu selections and service protocols that contradicted the carefully planned arrangements I had developed through my property management oversight. His directives reflected his assumption that his preferences would naturally take precedence over existing coordination, despite his complete lack of understanding regarding the operational complexities involved in executing such an elaborate celebration. The catering director, Maria Santos, had worked with me extensively during the vineyard's transformation into a premier event destination and was familiar with my management approach and quality standards. Her professional response to David's contradictory instructions demonstrated appropriate deference while subtly indicating that implementation would require coordination with existing operational protocols. David interpreted Maria's diplomatic responses as confirmation of his authority and expertise, failing to recognize that her professional courtesy masked confusion about his apparent lack of awareness regarding established arrangements. His satisfaction with the conversation reflected his assumption that his directives had been accepted and would be implemented according to his specifications. The reality was that Maria contacted me immediately after the call to clarify the apparent contradictions between David's instructions and the carefully planned arrangements we had previously established. Her questions about David's role in the decision-making process revealed her assumption that he was either uninformed about existing plans or operating under some misunderstanding about his authority regarding event coordination. My explanation to Maria required careful diplomatic language that preserved David's dignity while ensuring that the wedding celebration would proceed according to optimal operational standards. I described David as an enthusiastic family member whose excitement about the event had led him to offer suggestions that should be acknowledged respectfully, but not implemented without my specific approval. Maria's understanding response indicated her familiarity with complex family dynamics in high-end event planning, where family members often attempted to assert authority over arrangements they did not fully comprehend. Her professional expertise in managing such situations ensured that David's interference would not compromise the celebration's quality while preserving family relationships during the stressful wedding planning process. Similar complications arose with florists, musicians, and transportation coordinators who received conflicting directives from David while operating under existing contracts and arrangements that reflected my oversight and quality standards. Each vendor contact required diplomatic clarification that protected David's self-perception while ensuring that professional services would be delivered according to established specifications. The pattern revealed David's complete ignorance regarding the operational complexity involved in coordinating such a sophisticated celebration, while demonstrating his assumption that his enthusiasm and confidence could substitute for actual expertise and established vendor relationships. His willingness to override existing arrangements without understanding their rationale reflected the dangerous combination of arrogance and incompetence that characterized his approach to areas beyond his actual capabilities. During this period of intensified wedding coordination, my consulting practice achieved a significant milestone through the successful completion of the University System Endowment Restructuring Initiative. The comprehensive transformation had generated additional annual income exceeding $150 million for academic programming, research support, and student financial assistance across 12 campuses. Chancellor Morrison's assessment of the project results positioned Morrison Strategic Consulting as the premier consultant for large-scale educational asset optimization, attracting inquiries from university systems and major foundations throughout the country. The success established my national reputation as an innovative strategist who could deliver exceptional returns while supporting mission-critical objectives for educational institutions. The recognition led to an invitation to present my methodologies at the International Conference on Educational Philanthropy in Geneva, Switzerland, where university presidents and foundation directors from 43 countries would gather to discuss innovative approaches to funding higher education and research initiatives. The conference presentation represented an extraordinary professional opportunity that would establish my global reputation while providing access to international consulting opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The invitation reflected recognition of my analytical innovations and their potential application to educational funding challenges faced by institutions worldwide. However, the conference was scheduled for the same week as Michael and Alexandra's wedding, creating a conflict that would test my commitment to maintaining family relationships against pursuing transformational professional opportunities. The decision required careful analysis of long-term strategic implications while considering the impact on my relationship with David and his family. David's reaction to learning about the conference invitation revealed his complete inability to comprehend the significance of such professional recognition or its implications for our household's actual economic foundation. His immediate assumption was that the invitation represented a minor speaking opportunity that should be declined in favor of attending his brother's wedding celebration. His casual dismissal of what represented the pinnacle of professional recognition in educational philanthropy demonstrated his fundamental lack of understanding regarding my actual career accomplishments and their relationship to our sophisticated lifestyle and substantial resources. The conference invitation represented validation of expertise that exceeded anything he had achieved in his nonprofit career. Yet he viewed it as a minor conflict that should be resolved in favor of family social obligations. More troubling was David's assumption that he had authority to determine my professional priorities without consulting me about the strategic implications of such decisions. His directive that I should decline the conference invitation reflected his view of our marriage as a hierarchy where his preferences would naturally take precedence over my career development opportunities. The conversation revealed the extent to which David's perception of our relationship had evolved during the months of wedding planning success and social recognition. His confidence in making unilateral decisions about my professional activities demonstrated his belief that my contributions to our household were subordinate to his strategic oversight and approval. My decision to decline the Geneva conference invitation was based on strategic calculation rather than acceptance of David's authority over my professional priorities. The wedding celebration would provide optimal timing for revealing the scope of my hidden achievements to David's family and professional network, while the conference opportunity could be rescheduled for future engagement when operational security was no longer necessary. The sacrifice represented a significant short-term cost in terms of international exposure and business development opportunities, but the long-term benefits of dramatic revelation in an optimal social context would more than compensate for delayed professional recognition. The wedding would provide the perfect stage for demonstrating that the woman David had systematically diminished had actually built the foundation supporting everything he valued about our shared social status and economics. Prosperity. During the final weeks before the celebration, David's behavior toward me reached new levels of condescension and control that reflected his complete confidence in his fictional narrative about our household dynamics. His assumption that his wedding coordination success demonstrated superior strategic thinking and organizational capabilities led him to begin offering guidance about areas of my life where his expertise was obviously non-existent. The most egregious example occurred during a conversation about my wardrobe selections for various wedding events, where David provided detailed instructions about appropriate attire that reflected his expectations for how I should present myself as his spouse. His directives emphasized conservative styling and subdued colors that would ensure I remained appropriately supportive rather than drawing attention that might overshadow his prominent role in the celebration. David's clothing instructions reflected his assumption that my appearance should reinforce the supportive wife narrative he had constructed, while avoiding any presentation that might suggest independent professional status or social influence. His specific recommendations about jewelry, accessories, and hairstyling demonstrated his intention to control every aspect of my public presentation during the family celebration. The irony of receiving fashion guidance from someone whose lifestyle was entirely supported by my hidden professional success was profound, though I maintained appropriate diplomatic responses while mentally preparing for the revelation that would transform his understanding of our actual relationship dynamics. David's confidence in providing such detailed personal directives reflected his belief that the wedding planning success had established his credibility as a sophisticated social participant who understood appropriate presentation standards for exclusive celebrations. His assumption that I needed his guidance to navigate such social contexts demonstrated his complete ignorance regarding the professional circles where I regularly interacted with influential business leaders and prominent philanthropists. The wedding week arrived with David's excitement and anticipation reaching fever pitch as he prepared to serve as best man for his brother's celebration while demonstrating his supposed social sophistication and financial capabilities to extended family members and influential guests. His confidence in his prominent role during the festivities reflected his assumption that the event would provide perfect validation of his professional success and strategic planning expertise. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.